Well, hello and welcome to Lexipol Connect 2021 conference. My name is Sarah Wilson and I am the Vice President of Grants here at Lexipol. In this session, we're going to take a case study approach to explore how grant funding can help your law enforcement agency achieve operational priorities. Our session presenters are monitoring the chat box, so please send in your questions anytime during the presentation, and we'll do our absolute best to get back to you right away or address your question following the session. So let's go ahead and introduce our panelists for today. Joining me is first and foremost Sheriff Bill Martin. Sheriff Martin is an experienced sheriff with a demonstrated history of working in the law enforcement industry. He's skilled in private investigations, firearms handling, public safety, emergency management, and law enforcement. He has a strong military and protective services professional background with a bachelor focused in criminal justice from Pittsburgh State University and is currently serving the population of Bourbon County, Kansas. Samantha Dorm is a senior grant writer and consultant for Lexipol, where she's been working since 2010. Sam has been absolutely instrumental in providing grant writing guidance to various public safety and nonprofit agencies throughout the U.S. to enable them to obtain alternative funding, as well as provide instruction on statistical compilation, analysis, and program development. Sam is a reviewer for several federal agencies and also instructs grant writing workshops. And I'm excited that you both have joined us today. So with that, let's talk a little bit about our partnership and our client, Bourbon County, located in Kansas. So a little bit about Bourbon County. The Sheriff's Office serves a rural area covering 635 square miles, populated by 14,649 citizens. The Grants Division here at Lexipol began working with Bourbon County Sheriff's Office and Sheriff Martin in 2014 to address their equipment and personnel needs. As a small rural county, the Sheriff's Office faced challenges that many rural communities experience. This includes and has included a lack of funding sources for equipment and personnel. So let's talk about some of the projects that we've worked with them over the years, and then we'll jump into our discussion. So first and foremost, Bourbon County partnered with Uniontown School District, which is about 16 miles away from them, to respond to emergent events. Increased response time and threats of gun violence in the schools. Sheriff's Office realized that a need for a school resource officer located on site would help quickly respond to critical incidents and to be an everyday presence. So our solution, we partnered together and were able to apply to the COPS hiring grant when it reopened in 2020 and were successfully funded from that program. Just like everyone else in this past year, Bourbon County was faced with COVID-19, response challenges. At the time that they reached out to our team, they had already consumed 80% of the PPE supply, and they were, talking about, reopening. What was that going to look like? The Sheriff's Department, in partnership with other agencies, set a plan to replenish their PPE supplies and to sanitize public facilities. They reached out to our team. We were able to successfully apply for the Kansas Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Funding. This program was part of the CARES Act, and we're funded from there. And then back in 2014, Bourbon County experienced, tight budgets, aging equipment, and an increase in community needs. This included the need for equipment and much upgraded technologies. Over the course of 3 years, the Sheriff's Office applied with our partnership for funds through the Kansas Justice Assistance Grant, where they were awarded funding to purchase in-car videos, mobile data computers, and courthouse audiovisual conferencing equipment. To date, we have helped the Sheriff's Office and their community achieve over $500,000 in funding. Very excited to have the Sheriff and Sam here today. So let's open up to our discussion, and Sheriff Martin, as I was going, over the different projects and programs that we've assisted with and summarizing them, what stands out to you in your experience with working with Lexipol?
Well, thank you, Sarah, for having me, and good to see you, Sam. Uh, one thing that stands out is the grants, of course, that I received through Lexipol with the hard work with Lexipol and myself, and from that developed a great working relationship. This team style, uh, this the new buzzword, working together as a team, and that was something that was really developed early during the grant process. And since then, this has been a great working relationship with everybody involved with Lexipol.
And Sam, same question for you. I mean, it's been 7 years.
Well, Sarah, when you were first starting, you started at our most recent grants. And I would like to think that that process was so much easier, not just for our team, but certainly for the sheriff, because of having that long-standing relationship. You get to that point where you can kind of cut and paste. The size of the jurisdiction hasn't changed. The population has been somewhat static. And we can take the time to really dig into what they need and why they need it in helping to get them awarded. The best part of all of that is, allowing for the sheriff's office to still be able to do what they were assigned to do and not be, bogged down with all of the administrative components of a grant. They were ready.
Yeah. So I started off with the school resource officer project, specifically for us to dive in a little bit more. Sheriff Martin, what was the need for that when you think about that project and that submission? What was going on?
That was a need that needed to be addressed for several years. And I approached the commissioners several times during budgets and asking for additional personnel, at least one more deputy to be assigned to the Uniontown School District campus. And just like anywhere else, taxes, we don't need to tax our citizens. And they always have said, no, is there grants out there? Is there grants? So of course, I reached out to Lexipol and Sam and her group and the other teams and said, hey, I need a school resource officer grant. I need to apply. None of the demographics really have changed any, but with the distance where Uniontown sits in the center of Bourbon County, our response time from any direction to Uniontown would take some time. And having a deputy on campus of Uniontown would address, several issues that could or might occur. Of course, one of the things nationwide is active shooter. We'll have somebody there on campus. And sometimes we have parents who have custody issues, and they will try to go and pick up their child when they're not supposed to have custody of their child because of court orders. So having a deputy there on campus can address that issue quickly instead of waiting for a deputy to respond. That would take possibly 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes to get there. You have somebody there on campus to address those issues. And also other, typical or not typical, but, petty crimes, maybe still thefts or something like that. Though that officer can address those issues without taking a deputy from other important calls for service out in the county. I just have one deputy there on campus addressing all those issues. So basically, it's kind of a little mini police department, and the Uniontown School District is his city.
Yeah, yeah. And Sam, why the cops hiring grant? Why was that grant chosen?
The COPS hiring grant has been around for many years, and school resource officers have been an eligible expense as well under COPS hiring for quite some time. Those working on the law enforcement side, I believe, understood the value of having an officer on site, but our schools were kind of the holdout in many cases. They weren't really sure, if they wanted an officer or particularly to have a uniformed officer on their campuses. And so I believe it was right after the Parkland shooting that that was the first time for me that I saw funds kind of pulled back from other resources, from other agencies, and prioritized to address school safety and violence. And part of that had to do with being able to employ more SROs. So that's just been in these last few years. So it's not new concept for law enforcement, but it is certainly new in enhancing partnerships between law enforcement and schools.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Sheriff Martin, what would have happened in your community, say if the school resource officer or even some of the equipment grants that we have helped your agency, get, what would have been those impacts?
Well, the impacts is, they're kind of a twofold. I'd have to turn to, the taxpayers and
Yeah.
equipment and stuff like that. It's not cheap. It's kind of expensive, and trying to look at your capital outlay, personnel and budgets or benefits, cost the taxpayers quite a bit just to employ, one deputy here for the Bourbon County Sheriff's Department, including the benefits and the salaries and the wages. You're looking at close to about 65,000, close to $70,000 per employee, and that's a lot of money. And with that, we can turn to the grants and hopefully get awarded a grant. But if some of these grants weren't awarded to us, our prosecution rate would have declined, because our video cameras, that tells the story, because you have the so-called silent witness that's sitting there not saying anything, but observing and watching and recording the interaction that the law enforcement's taking place with the citizens during calls for service. And it just makes our job a lot easier. And most important, with the cameras, it holds us accountable. And so we can see what we're doing, so the police can police themselves and correct whatever issues that they may have. But the school resource officer, like I said, I explained that, and that's been great.
Mm-hmm.
Mobile data terminals that we got through Lexipol and the grants like that allows the officers to be seen more out in the community, where they can do their reports out in the community, be seen, instead of back in the office and somebody driving by going, how come there's a patrol car sitting in the parking lot when they should be out patrolling somewhere? Well, with the mobile data terminals, they can be sitting in a city park doing their reports and being seen, and that's in the public and the taxpayers see that they're taxpaying, their taxes are being spent on.
Yeah. So, I know we've worked together, for a long time and worked on a number of grants, but not all of them have been funded. So what advice, Sheriff, would you give to, other agencies who have to navigate a turn down, a non-award for a grant that they've submitted?
Don't be frustrated or upset, and don't blame yourself or any of the grant writers. It is a very competitive process. And if you don't know what you're doing as an administrator trying to write that grant, you're going to be lost. But when you turn to people like Lexipol and the grant writers, they're on top of things and they know exactly when the deadlines are, what's expected. But kind of sit back and take a step back, breathe, and then reach out to the organization or the government of the evaluators that were reviewing your grant, and respond or ask for a response. Where did I go wrong? What was the negatives and positive of that grant? And once you receive that, turn to the grant writers and say, hey, nothing against you guys. This is what we found out. What can we do together as a team to address these issues? And I will admit, this last grant that I tried to apply for a drug, for 2 drug detectives, it was my fault because there was some information that I did not provide. And it kind of reminded me of my college life, trying to study for an exam the night before, and I'm scrambling to get all this information. It was my fault. But when I got the response back, I said, yeah, it's mine. I hold the bag for that one, but this is what we need to do. What do you think? And with all the input and feedback and stuff with the evaluators or with the grant writers, we're going to do it again this year. And I'm just waiting for that to open up and sit down with my team, our grant writers, to get this going again.
Yeah. Sam, thoughts to share?
Absolutely. So one thing I will say in regards to the sheriff, he's been very confident in knowing what he needs for his department. He has done an excellent job of advocating for the community as well as for the officers assigned there. But his problem or the dilemma to get over was, okay, now how do we pay for this? And he's been very open and receptive to being strategic about making his request, whether that is going to be looking at the types of funders that are out there. We do that as a team. That's a huge part of this. We become an extension of the department. And looking at also then, what grants are going to work well, not just for the department, but for the county, because at the end of the day, our budgets are handled by the county commissioners. They're approved by the county commissioners. So we come in and we make sure that we are coming with the terminology and those solutions to help countywide, because those commissioners do have that fiduciary responsibility for the entire county, not just a single department. So we had to take a more global approach with this. And, the sheriff was very open to that. That doesn't always happen. So the success that you're seeing here is about the partnership. It's about the collaboration and that willingness to go the extra mile.
And that's such a great, I guess, follow on to my next question is, about working with a grant writer. And, is it just the writing of the grant, or is there more to it? What advice, I guess, would you share? And Sam, we'll just stay with you, and then Sheriff would love to get your thoughts too.
Absolutely. So, I always want to encourage departments to not be afraid. In teaching the grant workshops for a number of years now, particularly that first day, nobody wants to work on a grant. Just the idea and concept of just the word is going to scare them. And what they don't realize many times is that it's much of what they're already doing. So, hey, I want that information from your after action report so that we can see what went wrong. What were the problems? Because those problems are going to help me and our team to be able to design solutions for funding. So same process, different terminology. So we also want to encourage departments to get started early. Things happen. People get busy. You can't control when crime is going to take place, or maybe there's a family emergency. So we want to be able to help those departments to have their information readily available so that we're not missing deadlines and working with their team across the board.
Yeah, and Sheriff Martin.
Yeah, I would have to echo what Sam says. She hit it right on the spot. My job as sheriff is to lead my deputies to be public servants, to provide public safety. My job is not to sit at the desk with a calculator or an adding machine in front of me trying to figure out the numbers and stuff. Yeah, I'm supposed to do that at budget time, but I feel that's the only time I should be able to do that. But when it comes to the grants and stuff like that, make sure you have all that data and information there stored away, get it early, like Sam said, and then present it to the grant writers and sit down and talk it through, and you'll be successful when you listen to each other and be open-minded about it.
Yeah. So as we wind down our session for today, would love to just close with some words of wisdom that you would pass along to agencies that are currently pursuing grants and maybe haven't been as successful, or looking to start new grant projects. And maybe Sam, we'll start with you.
Well, in most cases, the grant application, when it comes to the writing, that's actually the easiest part of it. That takes maybe about 10 to 15% of the total amount of time that is put into a proposal. So prior to that, as far as words of wisdom, look at collaborating with others. We do know in recent years that those programs that are going to be for 2 or more departments will score higher in most cases. So if you can work with a neighboring department, communications is a prime example, be able to do that. Also, many of the applications have changed their pre-registration requirement. It's a 2-part application. That's usually not done within the police department. That's going to be working with your finance office. So make a friend with your finance office to make sure that you're administratively ready to be able to submit those applications. The last tip I would say, again, going back to the finance folks, in most cases, the reviewer knows and understands why our departments need what they're asking for. What we need to be able to do is convince them that we need someone else to pay for it. So that financial need information is huge, particularly now, the impact of COVID within the past year and a half. Being able to articulate what the financial burden has been for departments will go a long way. Make a friend with someone in finance.
And Sheriff Martin.
Yes, and once again, Sam nailed it. Don't be afraid to reach out for the help that you need for grants. If there's needs or something to make your department better for the employees themselves or for the community, reach out and ask for that help. Don't be afraid. If you get turned down, like I said, once again, don't be afraid, don't be disappointed, step back and reevaluate to see what happened, and reach out and get to the grant writers again and say, hey, we're going to do this again because we're going to work together as a team. And like Sam said, make friends with your finance advisors, because they're the ones that know the money. I don't. Like I said, I know policing. The finance advisors know money, and we need to sit down and figure out what we need to do and how we're going to reach that goal so that everybody's happy.
Absolutely. So make a friend in finance and don't give up. Well, I'd like to thank both Sheriff Martin and Samantha Dorn for joining us today to share their experiences working together and advice for navigating grants to support continuity of service. Thanks also to those who submitted questions and comments during the session. On this slide is our contact information. Please reach out if you have any questions or want to get more information on Lexipol's grant services. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of Connect 2021.